we are back with another audio session, this time from one of our sponsors, Dolby. It is called Enhancing Gameplay with Dolby Atmos. And in this session, you will learn how you can improve the gameplay in your games and add more 3D spatial audio, something that is useful if you're playing Counter-Strike and you want to know if the enemies are coming from the catwalk or from the lawn or wherever they're coming from. And also, of course, helps to put that little fear in if you're playing some sort of horror game or whatever other genre you might be playing. These tools will be useful for you to enhance the game experience. This will be presented by Theo Nogueira, Audio Director at Snowcastle Games, and Alistair Hirst, Senior Game Development Relations Manager at Dolby. Welcome on stage.
All right, thank you.
Great. Hello.
Hello. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, we're pretty happy to be here, and yeah. So we're going to be sharing our talk today. I'm Theo Nogueira. I'm the audio director and composer for Snowcastle Games. You see also Audiolabs. It's a division for Snowcastle Games, doing also audio outsourcing for other studios besides our own games. And
yeah, hi. I'm Alistair Hirst. I'm with Dolby Labs. Prior to Dolby, I spent 29 years in the industry, mostly as an audio director, creating the audio for a lot of games, including the Need for Speed franchise and a bunch of other stuff. And yeah, today we're talking about spatial audio in games. So first off, what is it? Well, when it comes to Dolby, we started off, in games with mono, stereo, went to 5.1. I remember the first game I did in 5.1 was Microsoft's hockey game, which was on the Xbox, which was the first console to support Dolby Digital. And then since then, things have evolved, and we've now added height channels to get the sound up above you. And then the other thing that is there with Dolby Atmos is we've added this concept of audio objects, so Dolby Atmos objects. So we've been working with objects in games, obviously, for years, but now we're able to attach Dolby Atmos objects, which takes it out of just the channel-based representation and basically allows you to place those sounds anywhere around you. And then last year, on the Microsoft platforms, they did an upgrade, and we've now evolved up to 127 objects available on Xbox S and X and on Windows 11. So things keep advancing in the spatial realm as well. And what this does is, the aim of this, obviously for sound in games, is to get the player ever more immersed into the worlds that we are creating, right? And so by creating sounds and putting them all around you, that's a lot more like what happens in the real world. In real world, you're hearing the reverb coming from behind you and everything. Not everything just comes from this flat plane in front of you. So it's just working towards making that whole game more immersive with audio. So, as I said, we started way back when. My first game was on the Sega Genesis, was in mono, right? And then we've evolved from the Xbox to 5 channels, and now up to Atmos, which the standard layout for your studio, which we'll cover later, has expanded over time. These are just some of the latest games, or more recent games that support Atmos. And if you check on YouTube, actually under Dolby Creators Lab, you can see I did some interviews with the Helldivers 2 team and Baldur's Gate and the Star Wars Outlaws team, if you want to hear more about how they use spatial audio in their games, along with a lot of the sound design and approaches to their mixes. So, some technical considerations. How exactly do you set these things up? So in your audio middleware, you would have a 7.1.4 panner, and you can put your sounds. So most of our sounds in games tend to be mono, and you can put those around, and you feed those into your 7.1.4 panner. And then you usually would set up as well a stereo bus. This is what we call your pass-through bus. This is specialized in terms of sounds that you don't want to have spatialized. If you want them in headphones to just be like regular stereo for, say, comms or UI sounds, you could put those through your pass-through bus. And then, as we said, in Dolby Atmos and spatial, we have this concept of audio objects. And this is important for games. So in a movie theater where Dolby Atmos originally started, you have a huge theater and you can steer the sound around the room. Obviously in home theaters, it's a lot smaller, so it has less impact there. But where it has big impact for games is when you put it onto headphones, right? And then each individual object on headphones gets its own HRTF, its own head-related transfer function. And we don't have time in this talk to go into that, but basically it increases the precision of where those sounds are in space. So all those buses are then fed through to the Dolby Atmos renderer, which is sitting in the OS layer on the Xbox and the PC and on the PlayStation 5. So all those buses are fed into the Dolby Atmos renderer, where it then either goes out HDMI to your home theater or your soundbar, or if people are in headphones, that's where it goes out. It gets binauralized and sent to the headphone renderer. So you do get spatial over any pair of headphones. All right. So what do you need to create a game in Atmos? Any pair of headphones will work if you're doing it over headphone rendering. And basically, on Microsoft platforms, you just need to download the Dolby Access app. And in there, you can go and set up and configure for spatial.
Yeah. And that's a general misconception, because a lot of people think about the gear needed. It's like, oh, yeah, you need a full theater with lots of speakers to be able to do this. But you actually are able to do that quite easily on headphones. Of course, maybe you don't get the full fidelity, which is the reason why once you mix a big pop song that you want to go on the radio, you probably want to do this on a big recording studio, because you want to hear it how it's going to sound on its highest level. So it's going to work well with whatever system that you are thinking about. So the gear recommended, of course, would be 5.1.4, which is the minimum for a small mixing room. And then you can have a 7.1.4, which is the standard. This is what I have. That's my room in Oslo. And you also can go even more on an extended spatial range and go to a 9.1.6 or even more subs to get that extra fidelity. But of course, again, this is for you to have a proper understanding of the spatial side of things, of where things are placed, how are they playing. And I will tell you, the cool thing about this room is to actually play Dolby Atmos enabled games in it. And it's a lot of fun. So just a little bit more about what we do. Currently, Snowcastle Games is a studio that has been around in Oslo for the last 15 years. I've joined them about 5 years ago. And Audiolabs is a division that we started about a year ago to outsource work with other studios on top of the work we do in-house. So we grew our team a little bit. We got these really cool studio and a few other rooms where we are actually able to provide audio for other studios. Coney Island is the game that we released, well, last year. We actually won the Nordic Game Awards last year for that game. And Lizward, which is the game we're currently working on. But Yield and Jetrunner are games we're working for other studios. And Yield, Lizward, and Jetrunner are all Dolby Atmos enabled. And the cool thing is, once I got the room, I was able to set it up so I actually start the work in Atmos already. If I'm making music for the game, I'm already starting my Logic session in Atmos. So I already place things based on how it's going to sound. Even though maybe my final bounce that's going to go into the game might be stereo or even a 5.1 bounce, I still work spatializing everything in Logic in Atmos. And it completely changed my workflow, and I love it. Yield was actually done on Fmod, while Jetrunner, Lizward, and Coney Island are done directly in Unreal Engine. But to bring this up as well, you can also use Wise. And it's also probably the strongest tool with Dolby Atmos at this moment. But they are all capable, and you can still achieve the spatial audio needs that will get you there. And yeah, so just to a brief overview on how it works on that room you just saw. I have 2 computers. I have a PC, which is where I do most of the implementation, while I have a Mac where I do most of the audio work. And they are both connected kind of together. I have a system where I use the same keyboard and mouse for it. And they go through the interface and through an AV receiver. That's what a lot of people don't understand. How does this work? Because PCs have to go through the HDMI, and for you to go through the HDMI, for you to spread the analog channels, you need to use an AV receiver. If anybody is interested in the end of the presentation, you can either come to me or send me an email. There's a contact there, and I can give you a list of cool recommendations of the ones you could look into. Then from there, it goes straight to the actual speakers. I have Neumann's. On a 7.1.4 format. Any questions on this, by the way? Quickly. We can leave it for the end as well, that's fine. So getting a little bit more, and I think this could be something we could probably kind of do together, is how does Atmos enhance the actual gameplay? This is what this talk is really about, right? Why we've been looking at 3D audio for the past 40 years and thinking about it like, okay, yeah, it's already 3D on a game. It's always been 3D. Why? What is the difference here? One of the biggest differences I've noticed working with Atmos so far has been on ambiences. Ambiences play a huge role because once you have something that's moving and you put an audio object on this moving object, you actually get a lot more precise location for it. It also gives you a lot more space in the mix.
Yeah, and just in terms of, if we look at the category of ambiences, of sucking you into the game by providing something more immersive. So there's an example, we have background ambiences, right? And just through your ambiences, you could place the player in a specific time, a place or a mood. For example, let's just say there's a street scene, and if you close your eyes and listen, if you're listening and you hear horse-drawn carriages, that puts you in a specific place very different than if you hear gasoline engines and cars going by versus you're listening to hover cars or, speeders going by. Very different environments. So it helps pull that player into that particular time place, right? Or if we're sitting and we're listening and it's crickets around you and jungle birds, that tells us a lot different thing than if you're hearing, cold winds blowing across ice flows. Just listening to that can pull us into where we are location-wise and time-wise. And also, depending on the type of sounds you're choosing, sets the tone or the mood of it, right? You dial up the resonance on the wind, that can help make it colder, so it's informing you of the temperature even of the environment that you're in. And so, like I mentioned before at the beginning, in the real world, we hear sounds all around us, not just from this flat plane in front of us, so it helps suck the player more into your game.
One thing I was going to say on that too is for Jet Runner, the game that you saw there, there is an actual trailer coming out for it very soon. The game is very busy. There is a lot going on. And if it wasn't for Atmos, I think it was going to get very hard to identify where everything is coming from. There is a lot of different sounds. And then you can actually give priority of what's going to play where and when, and what's more important and what should go, because you put it on the bed, you want to have an object for the ones that you really want to hear. So I think it's a very cool part of that.
So yeah, as we were talking about how the ambiences create more immersion, how multi-channel puts it all around you, creates all that. And the other example is reverb. We hear reverb from all around us, not just that flat plane in front of us. So that's another reason why immersive will help pull you more into the game and just set everything to be more realistic. So the other place where spatial comes in really handy is that we tie it to objects that are moving. Usually in games, if something is moving, you usually want to put a sound on that, right? And then also things that move, we want to put sounds on those, like animating props or particle effects, like a fountain perhaps, or flaming torches for the, obviously see that in a lot of games, and character foley. So that's just one more thing that will pull the player more into the game. And then also that gives you a sense of localization. So it's providing information to the player that I can hear something behind me, which is important in some games like shooters or whatever, to be able to localize where your enemies are at.
Yeah, this one is interesting. There's even one thing that I was going to bring on that one is a lot of this is things that you're seeing, things that are around the world, but it also informs you of things that you're not seeing. If you are on a cave and it's dark, you don't see all that's going on, but the auditory part of it is very important, because you want the player to feel like they are in that cave, and just being in the dark doesn't really inform them everything they need to know about the place they're in. But having that understanding, okay, I'm in a tight space, I can hear the river bouncing back and forth, and I can kind of tell what's around me. There's a bat flying around. I think that is the coolest part of that, is that you really can make use of proper ambience design on a spatial moment. And of course, it also tells you if there's an enemy coming, or if you have someone close to you that you're playing with. Also, anything that's related to gameplay that's not specifically seen, right? On Listward, we have or not even a particle effect, but a moment where you're starting to overheat. And we started working with this system to create the sense of overheating, which is not really, it's not really something you see, but you need to feel it. And that is a big part of that, because we're kind of compressing you in, and using 3D enhanced audio through spatial makes a huge difference on that sense.
Yeah, I recently interviewed the audio director, Pete Ward, who did the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle game. He had a really interesting example of when Indiana Jones cracks his whip. It wasn't working at first when they put it in, but they put an object on the end of the whip so that when it goes around your head, it literally goes around and you could hear it that way. And he said as soon as they did that, it was like, okay, there it is. You're Indiana Jones. You can really hear that whip going around your head as he gets it and whips the whip. So, questions. Before that, I just wanted to point out a couple things. You can mix in Atmos, and just the nature of the way that Dolby has set up the algorithms, it will fold down is the term that we use. So if you have a full Atmos system, you'll obviously get everything all around you. But if someone is listening on a, say, 7.1 or 5.1 system, it will fold down to all those channels gracefully, and it will maintain the creative intent of your mix as much as it can. And then if you are playing in stereo, so you go from a full Atmos mix and someone's playing on an iPad, it will fold down all the way to stereo, but it won't affect your mix in a negative way. It will maintain your mix. One thing I talk to developers all the time, and I'll bring up is like, do you want to talk about the fold down and anything you have to do for the fold down? And I get this over and over. They say, no, the fold down works. It just works. It's fine. We don't even need to talk about it. It's okay. There's nothing you need to deal with. So that's one important thing to know. So you mix in that 7.1.4, but you could check in stereo and check the fold downs. But like I said, most developers find that it maintains the mix that they wanted. And then the last point I wanted to make is that to you as a developer, the cost to put Atmos in your game, there's no licensing costs or anything like that. Dolby makes its money by licensing on the decode end to the sound bars and TVs in cars, that kind of a thing. So you can go right ahead. There's no licensing fees to put it in your game.
And yeah, the only thing I was going to say last on that as well is, like I said, it changed my workflow, not only on the developing and the implementation side, but on the creation side. So like I wasn't going to create 7.1 ambiences on a DAW before. I would just give a stereo file and put it in there, and then figure out how to place it to make it sound like you are in that area. But that is not something I do anymore. I would look at it on a spatial format of it. I will actually work on a 7.1 version, or maybe I will take multiple ambience files and build that bed in Logic first and come out, give a proper positioning of that, and then I will come out of that with a 7.1 file that I will put it in the game, and it will just fold down really well into stereo afterwards as well. I think it's a really cool way to work on that sense.
Yeah. Have any questions? Good.
Hello. Thank you for a great talk, first of all. I'm interested in RTF, but I won't go into that because, or HRTF, because, yeah. But I was going to ask about the compromise.
Well, let me cover HRTF. I'll give you the 30-second version. Okay. I've sat through many hour-long versions. Basically, the long and short of it is this. Okay, here's the sound here. Okay, when I do that, this one sound hits my ear a little bit earlier than this side. Okay, so that's interaural time difference. The other thing that happens is my head is actually shadowing some of the higher frequencies, right? So as it goes around. And then the other thing is I have these flaps on the side of my ears, which is unique to everybody, that as the sound goes in, it reflects a little bit. So our brains combine all these things, and we just do this automatically because this is a survival instinct. Our hearing is our fastest sense. Auditory stuff goes straight into our deep lizard brain there because it kept us alive, right, as we were evolving. And so it goes right to your subconscious. So HRTF, what it is it's taking these cues and using those things to figure out where a sound is in space. There, you're an expert in HRTF now.
Thank you. But I wanted to ask about the compromises that gaming has taken so far in stereo audio. When we face realism, we've done tricks as like reducing volume for objects behind you to simulate this. And these are tricks we're all very used to subconsciously. But with 7.1, you're actually simulating it. Have there been any issues or challenges in facing an audience that is used to a very traditional sense of like stereo tricks with giving them a full audio solution in 7.1, or have you made any compromises in the realism?
No, I mean the one thing that does happen is when you fold down. So maybe this is related to your question. So when that fold down happens in the settings, it will take the channels behind you will get dropped 3 dB. Right, so that's part of the fold down to try and maintain the creative intent on your mix. But you know, for music, for example, there are trims where the engineer can set how much those things are, if they are attenuated or not going forward. So that may or may not come to games at some point. But right now, the algorithm they use, we've done lots and lots of user testing, is like, okay, is this maintaining that creative intent? So generally, like I said, I talk to audio people all the time, and they're like, nah, it just worked, it's fine. You know, at first we kept checking, and then we realized it's okay.
I think on my end, for that question specifically, when I think about actual mixing music, it changed a lot. Like my workflow big time, because I don't need to think about all these tricks to actually give you the full perspective of the room. I just place them and it works. And the best part, I think, on that as well, on the game side, is that I don't need to do 300 different mixes. One for headphones and one for this and one for that. I just do one and it's done. So I can really focus on that one mix and make that one mix really good, and it will work for whatever the end user is using. So I think that is definitely the biggest selling point on that for me.
Yeah, one thing that's come up, I talked to one of the composers on Destiny, and I was saying, okay, so you have your surround mix. When you do the fold down, are you finding that, you know, that matters? Because in stereo mixes, we've worked so hard to make sure all the instruments, you know, have their space. And I was really surprised. He said, you know what? No, we don't even, most of the time it just works. And occasionally they will fold it down to stereo and then listen to that and decide, okay, we need to EQ out some stuff here or there just to make the stereo fold down work a little bit better. But he was so surprised, and so was I actually, of how minimal he actually needs to do that the fold down just worked. Like I keep hearing that over and over. Fold down just works.
Yep.
Good question.
Hello, Mikko Altio from Finland, composer. I was wondering about music and Atmos. You said, Theo, that it has changed your workflow. How? Because music is mostly non-diegetic in games. So I'm wondering how you use the surround channels.
Well, it changed on how I place everything. I don't need to think about using EQs in the way of filtering to give it space for just because of the room or the positional part of where things are going to go. I can really put a bass full on center, right? And really not let it bleed too much to the sides. I can specifically place a guitar on the right, but not only on the right, but how close to me do I want it? And then I can put another guitar behind it, and you can actually tell the difference without me having to just tweak EQs and tweak reverbs and volumes to actually achieve that. I don't need to do any of that anymore. It's just about placing it, and then I'll probably tweak a little bit of volume, but generally it's not much that I do in terms of positional of where things are going. Plus, now I can actually play with height, which makes a huge difference, because even when I fold it down to stereo, you can properly hear that it's really well divided. Things still go to the right place, and just without me having to do all that work.
And Theo's in the forefront of this, but I would really encourage that, because a lot of games, I mean, it's starting to change now, but games were just putting in those stereo things. Our colleagues in film and TV have been doing this now for a while, where you'll notice that their music gets pulled out to the side, which leaves a lot more room in the front for your dialogue and your hard sound effects, right? So this is the whole thing that happens with spatial. It opens up your mix. It provides greater clarity, so you can hear everything a lot better. So by pulling, even your string pads, or your choirs to the back or things like that, it just opens up the mix, and so you can hear everything a lot better. And like I said, clarity for dialogue, your hard gunshots or whatever coming from the front just have a lot more impact. So I would encourage you, like Theo is doing, to experiment with your music and pull it out.
And some of the DAWs even have Atmos already in it.
Yeah.
So, and it works great. And I'll tell you that from Logic specific, I know it works. I know it works with Cubase and Nuendo.
Yeah, I use Nuendo.
And there's quite a few more DAWs that it's just inbuilt now, and it works really well.
And Pro Tools obviously is being used, a lot in Hollywood, so it has good support too.
Hello. I have a question. I have two questions, maybe two quick questions. Dolby Atmos for headphones on PlayStation 5, I think, is not supported. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Is there any plans for?
That is up to Sony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not happening. And then I was playing around with Dolby Atmos on the Series X and testing a lot of games, and I've been thinking about, I wish I had some options to tweak the way maybe the HRTF or something, because I have trouble getting used to the filtering, like the little phasing artifacts and stuff. And are there settings that you would recommend for just the end user to play around with, or is it just like it is the way it is?
It is just the way it is, yeah.
Okay.
But I will take that back to Dolby Labs.
Maybe I have sensitive ears.
I actually would say Dolby is actually very open to feedback, and it's been great working with Alistair. And every time we hear something or something is off, they're always very open to feedback. So I would recommend, if you have any ideas, anything that you're feeling, definitely reach out.
Yeah, I do encourage that. My role with Dolby is obviously to talk to you and explain and make sure you understand what's going on. But internally at Dolby, having been in the game industry for 29 years, I sort of represent you internally at Dolby.
Hello. I was wondering if you have a list of compatible receiver, because it's something that is really tedious to find online.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned that just before, but
yep.
I saw very different kind of hardware, so I was wondering.
Yeah, feel free to just, we will have a contact image right after that. We can actually just skip to it, so we have that in there.
Yeah.
And you can always get the presentation from there as well. Feel free to just shoot me an email, and I can send you a list of what I've researched, because yeah, it's tricky because you need to find something that works with Atmos, but also that has the analog outs, and you will probably still have to go through that to an interface that will do it too. So it's the way that it generally works.
And I believe on Dolby.com there is a list somewhere there that has a whole list of all the receivers and everything that support Dolby Atmos. So you can find that there. But yeah, contact Theo for some recommendations.
Hey, Leo from Tumult Collective. I had a question. Do you have any data on how many players or people are actually using Dolby Atmos in the games that are supporting it?
We have some, but it's not released publicly. And then the other thing where it's hard to know is because once that signal leaves the HDMI cable and goes out to the AVR, we don't know how players have it set. Right. So yeah, nothing public.
All right. And is it like standardly on when people select headphones as their output, for example, or is it like they have to specifically still set up Dolby Atmos?
So on the Xbox platforms and PC, you go in and you configure, and that's what the Dolby Access app is partly for. So they need to configure it there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But once you do it once, that's it. Then you can use it for any games or anything you do. Yeah. Then it's automatically on from then on.
Cool. Thank you.
It's part of the. Also, we talked to Microsoft a lot actually about this. The out of the box experience is what they call it, the OBE. So it's part of that user flow when you set up your Xbox, where when you plug into the AVR, there's check boxes and says, oh, you can, you're not using this, you have this, do you want to turn on spatial, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And we are always working on getting that better.
Sorry, another question, very technical one. If I'm not mistaken, there is on Mac, on Core Audio, the option to transform Dolby Atmos mixes to discrete channel. Is there any way that it will happen to PC too once?
I think that's when the Dolby Atmos bitstream comes out, and that's where when you're monitoring that you have the AVR in there, where we were talking about that.
Actually, on Mac you can
or is that it?
You can demax it into discrete channel directly.
Right. Yes. Not on a PC. That's why the AV receiver.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not on plan. I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I use Dante straight from my Mac as well. So if I want to stream something that's not specifically on Logic or anything that is already enabled, even if I just want to play Apple Music or Tidal or anything like that, I go through Dante. It's easier to route things that way. But generally, because the interface I have is Thunderbolt 3, and that goes through straight. But anything else will go through Dante. But through the PC, I don't work that way. It just goes through the HDMI to the receiver. That's the job of the receiver, really. There's one all the way on the top, and there's one here.
Thank you. You mentioned when you were talking about you're working on a game where there's a lot of stuff going on, and it sounded like you had some way of automatically prioritizing audio objects and then downmixing some of it to the bed. You said something like just put it on the bed.
Yes.
So is that something that the system handles automatically?
Yeah. So for that game, we're working on Unreal 5.5. And through MetaSounds, you're able to just prioritize things, and you can tell what's going to an object and what's not. So that is how we're working. And of course, you create mixes, then you're able to just bring down the rest and make sure the most important ones or the objects are going to have priority over the others. So if an object plays, you can have the other ones kind of duck to get more space for those objects. So it gives them a very nice space around it. Besides, of course, being an object, they have a more precise location and everything is a little bit more.
Yeah, same in Wise and Fmod. Basically, you can, in your structure, set up if something is going to be an object. So it's routed to the object bus, or is it routed to the beds or to the pass-through? So you set up those buses. So that's the key. That's another thing for your game. The sooner you set up that bus structure, right, of your pass-through, your beds, and your objects, then you can make and then you would sort of default to beds, and then you can make your decisions of what you want to go to objects. And then as we move into this world now where you have 128 objects, depending on your game, generally speaking, most games use less than 127 voices. Some, I know of one outlier uses 300. So you would have to manage those voices a lot more. Or, on previous games where we, had a limit of say, 16 objects, people would decide, off what are the ones that they definitely want to be going to those objects. And so you would, in your code, manage your voice objects that way. But like I said, as we go to 127 objects, that's becoming less of an issue. But that's where you're doing it, though. It's in your middleware. You set up that bus structure, and you're deciding, what goes where. Make sense? Okay.
There is one question all the way on the top has been...
Hey, Joost here. Thanks for the good talk. I'm working on a musical horror punk game called Fiend. Do you have any recommendation? Like spatial audio will be super important for the game. Do you have anybody like a recommendation who I should connect with?
For what specifically?
Yeah.
To help me.
On the mixing side of how you're going to separate and things like that.
Like composing, mixing, everything basically.
Oh, just shoot me a message. I can see as well with you and what we can.
Yeah, that guy. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would also say go to YouTube and search for Dolby Creator Lab, and there's some interviews there that I've done with the Helldivers 2 team, and there will be some more coming out. It's interesting to watch those. And then, go to professional.dolby.com/gaming. There's a whole bunch of documentation there that I wrote that should help you in terms of figuring out how that all works. And if you're finding stuff that's not covered, fire me off an email. I'd like to know, if I'm missing, I need to add stuff.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looks like we're done.
Yeah. Well, feel free to also reach out to me after, or Alistair after as well. I'll be here until Friday. So, happy to answer any questions.
Yep. Oh, one last thing on the documentation is also check out the documentation of your middleware. Audio Kinetic definitely has a lot of fantastic documentation, and regularly a lot of videos, a lot of support stuff there in terms of configuring. So you can check out your middleware for that as well.
Perfect. Well,
okay.
Thank you guys for that. Can we give a big applause for our speakers?